Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about two different things. We're going to review how to multiply a whole number by a fraction, and then we're going to start talking about multiplying a fraction by a fraction. So the first thing, on Thursday we talked about how to multiply whole numbers and fractions. I want to go back through and discuss that to make sure that we have that. As you can remember, when we talked about multiplying a whole number by a fraction, the first thing that we talked about was how to make a whole number into a fraction. So if I were to have a number like 48, what would I need to do in order to make that number into a fraction? I wouldn't do 48 over 48 because that's just going to give me 1. Instead, I have to put 48 over 1. So that's the appropriate way to make a whole number into a fraction, is just by putting it over 1. The next thing that we talked about was our 3 steps to how to multiply a whole number and a fraction. Step number 1 was that we had to make sure that our whole number was a fraction. So, for example, if I had the problem 6 times 3/5, okay? My first step is to turn this 6 into a fraction. So, in order to do that, I would have to put 6 over 1. I'm going to rewrite my problem just for myself. And now I'm ready to solve. My numbers line up. So the second step would be to multiply the numerator times numerator. So I need to figure out what 6 times 3 is. So I know that 6 times 2 is 12, and I'm going to count up 6 from 12. So 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. 6 times 3 is 18. Now I have to multiply down here my denominators. 1 times 5 I know is 5. In this case, we have something called an improper fraction. An improper fraction is when the top number is bigger than the bottom number. If you look at it, okay, this is where I'm going to have to use my cowboy and horse theory just as a reminder of what number goes where when I'm dividing. I don't want an improper fraction. I want to make this into a mixed number. So this is my cowboy and this is my horse. When I go to set up my division problem, my cowboy goes in the house, my horse goes on the outside of the house. How many times can 5 go into 18? 5, 10, 15, 20. Can't go 4 times, but it can go 3 times because 5 times 3 is 15. 18 minus 15 is 3. Now, I have to remember how to make a mixed number from this. This 5 was my denominator. 5's going to stay my denominator. 3, my remainder, is going to be my numerator, and therefore I'm going to have the fraction, or the mixed number, 3 and 3/5. So the answer to 6 times 3/5 would be 3 and 3/5. Okay? Let's do one more of these together. Alright, so 10 times 1/9. Again, the first thing that I have to do is I have to turn 10 into a fraction. So 10 over 1 times 1/9. Now, I'm ready to multiply. Got some simple multiplication going straight across. 10 times 1 is 10. 9 times 1 is 9. Again, I have another improper fraction, so I'm going to have to divide using my strategy. How many times can 9 go into 10? It can go 1 time. 1 times 9 is 9. When I subtract, I get 1. Again, we've got to build our mixed number. So my whole number is going to be 1. My numerator is going to be 1. My denominator is going to be 9. Therefore, our mixed number is 1 and 1/9. Okay? Alright, starting to talk about multiplying fraction by fraction. For me, multiplying fraction by fraction is pretty simple because there's one less step that you have to do than you do when you have a whole number in a fraction. You don't have to change anything. You just simply take the two fractions and you multiply. This is where you're going to want to get your math notebooks out and you're going to want to write these notes down. Okay? I will be checking for these tomorrow or at some point this week. So please make sure that you have these notes in your math notebook. So I'm going to title this page, Multiplying So I'm going to title it Multiplying Fraction by Fraction. And you're going to want to make sure that you date it 11/13/17. And here we're going to list our steps out just like we did with multiplying whole numbers and fractions. Again, I told you I'm going to skip the first step of making it into a fraction because I don't need to. It's already fractions. So, step 1 is going to be to multiply your numerators. Pretty simple. You're just going to multiply your numerators straight across. Your second step is going to be to multiply the denominators. Lastly, the third step is just going to be to simplify. Go ahead now and make sure that you have all three of these steps in your notebook. Down at the bottom, you can leave room for examples because we will be doing some examples of these in just a minute. Take a minute now to finish getting these down. Alright, we're going to start with some example problems. The first example that we're going to do is very simple. It's going to be 1/4 times 1/3. Okay, so step 1 I said was to multiply your numerators. So I need to multiply 1 times 1. So I know that 1 times 1 is 1. Next step I need to do is I need to multiply 4 times 3, and I know 4 times 3 is 12. Therefore, your answer to this problem is simply just 1/12. Now, problem number 2. I want you guys to try this one on your own first. Go ahead now, get the problem written down, and go ahead and solve it on your own. I know 1 times 1 is 1, and I know that 5 times 6 is 30. Therefore, the answer to this problem is going to be 1/30. Now, what happens when we get into harder numbers and even bigger numbers or bigger fractions? So let's look at a couple of those. If I have the fraction 2/3 and 4/5, looking at this fraction again, I'm going to follow my same steps. So 2 times 4 I know is 8. And down on the bottom, 3 times 5. Well, 3 times 5 is 15. Now, I have the fraction 8/15. We really haven't had anything that we need to simplify yet, so we need to think about this fraction and see if we need to simplify it. Okay? I have the numbers 8 and I have the number 15. Do they have any factors in common? The factors of 8 are 1, 2, 4, and 8, and the factors of 15 are 1, 3, 5, and 15. Do they have any factors in common? No, they don't, so this fraction cannot be simplified. It is 8/15. It's in simplest form. Alright, the next problem we're going to try is 6/7 times 3/4. So I know that 6 times 3 is 18, and 7 times 4 is 28. Alright? Now, again, I'm going to list my factors out of each of these numbers just to make sure and see if they don't have any common factors. So I know the factors of 18 are 1 and 18, 2 and 9 and 3 and 6. The factors of 28 are 1 and 28, 2 and 14, 4 and 7. Do you notice as we go through each of these, do you notice any of them having common factors? Do any of the numbers overlap? I see 2's that overlap. Therefore, I can divide both of these numbers by 2 to simplify. 18 divided by 2 I know is 9. 28 divided by 2 is 14. Therefore, in simplest form, my answer is 9/14. We've also talked about something called equivalent fractions. 18/28 is an equivalent fraction to 9/14. And I know I've seen a lot of you guys working on that on MobyMax as well. Okay? If you have any questions, please make sure that you ask. Go ahead now, make sure that you have all of this written down in your notebook, and then go ahead on to the next activity.